Okay. Can people online hear?
Oh, I moved the chat.
Said yes? Okay, let's go.
I moved the chat to the other desk.
Oh, that's my
All right.
Sorry.
Caveat that you won't be able to see it.
Whoops. Okay. All right. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. So, quick talk, inshallah, okay, on why we should study Islam and perhaps more importantly, how. So you can save a lot of time and a lot of energy in learning the things that are most important for you and cut your journey short. So, first thing we need to talk about when we talk about why we should study Islam are what are the virtues of seeking knowledge in Islam. And I'll talk about this eventually, okay? But it's easy to lose sight amidst current circumstances into why it's important to learn the religion, although I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because mashallah, people showed up here. Okay, so that's why this topic is more important than ever. Okay, I'm going to mention certain narrations and certain hadith and other things that will talk about why it's still relevant today as well. So first of all, the first virtue, the most important thing to realize is that Islam began with knowledge. The first verse revealed was to do with education. When the Prophet ﷺ was on the mountain of light, Jabal Nur, and it was said to him, Iqra, read or recite. Actually, read, Iqra is recite. Okay, Rattil would have been recite. But Iqra instead, read. So as a word that immediately has some sort of connotative or contextual meaning associated with knowledge. And that's just, the beginning of Islam. We're going to talk about, why is it doing that? Why am I asking why is it doing that? It always does this sometimes, somewhere, some room. Okay, sorry. Too long in UTM. So the first verse to be revealed of the Quran was about education. Okay, Islam literally started, the first word of the Quran started with some concept of education, right? So that immediately sort of sets the stage for what Islam is. Islam is a religion that emphasizes learning, education, knowledge, right from the get-go. From the beginning of Islam itself, from the beginning of revelation, there was an emphasis on learning and knowledge. The path of learning also takes us to Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man salaka tariqan fil ilm, sahhalallahu tariqahu ila al-jannah." That whoever travels the path of knowledge, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make easy their path to paradise. So here again, we have an indicator that it's not just that Islam began with knowledge, but that knowledge acquisition, knowledge implementation, etc., this whole journey of knowledge is going to make easy our path to Jannah. Now let's make this a little bit more interactive perhaps. Why is that the case? You guys all tired from class? Just wait till you guys experience adulting, okay? Adult stuff, it's harder. I was just telling, who did joke? I cracked the joke at, where'd she go? I was like, it only gets worse from here. It's depressing, but anyways. There's no silver lining I was gonna mention in case you're waiting for it. Okay, another virtue of learning Islam is that it is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us or preferred us in a certain way. So the Prophet ﷺ also said, "Man arada Allahu bihi khayran yufaqihuhu fid din." That whoever Allah wills good for, He will grant them a deep and detailed understanding of the religion. That word in the hadith, tafaqquh or tafqih in this case, yufaqihuhu fid din means what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us a detailed understanding and deep. So it's deep, technically what the word means is deep understandings, one after the other. A lot of familiar faces here. Okay, so a lot of deep understandings, one after the other. So learning Islam itself is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed good for us. It's not only taking us to Jannah, but it's also a sign of goodness in this life as well. If you're traveling the path of seeking knowledge, it's almost as if you're being given preferential treatment in terms of your deen, in terms of your religion. I still want to attack on that. Why do people, anybody have any opinions on why does knowledge make it easier for us to get to Jannah? Who can fancy a guess? Yes.
We know properly the way Allah wants us to worship Him.
Good. Okay. It's okay. Yes. Wait 1 second. So yes, good. Okay. If we know how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know how to correctly do. Maybe there's a bit of background involved in this. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, obey Allah and His Messenger, many times throughout the Quran, أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول, there is an indication that we have to believe and practice Islam in a certain way. Okay? And when we do that, when we obey Allah and His Messenger, that's when we're given salvation, or that's when we're given some sort of alleviance to entering into Jannah. So yes, that's one way, okay, in that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we do what He's asked us to do in a correct way when we learn and acquire more knowledge. So obviously that's going to get us to Jannah much easier, instead of having to worship Allah incorrectly or do serious mistakes that invalidate our acts of worship for years on end, only to learn later that we were mistaken. Anything else? Faris, you had your hand up? No? Anyone else? Yes.
It's like a hadith about all the authenticity, but it's like the blood of the ink of the scholars more holy than the blood of a martyr.
I have heard of it. I don't think it's authentic that much.
Yeah,
but
it's like common saying as well, which I guess I've heard of, but it is very pretty sure. At least maybe even more.
I don't know. Okay. Yes.
Well, if you know more, then you're able to relate more to others, which also could make it easier to get things done.
Okay, good. Okay, if you know more, you're able to relay it to others and you increase your good deeds that way. I'll tell you one case of that a lot of people, I guess your age, don't think that much about. Although everyone for some reason is thinking about marriage. No one's thinking about kids though, right? Everyone, when it comes to university and a little bit after, the hot topic, okay, Islam's all about marriage for some reason, right? Istikhara, everyone wants to learn istikhara, why? To get married. Anyways, the whole point is though, eventually, inshallah, you will likely have kids at some point. Inshallah, okay? I'm assuming that the Muslim birth rate is higher than others. Whatever, okay? You're eventually gonna have to have kids, or you're gonna have kids eventually, inshallah. Now, at that point, certain things you have to teach to your kids, like you're held responsible on Yawm al-Qiyamah if you don't teach your kids certain aspects of the religion. Okay, either you teach them yourself or you get someone else to teach them. Okay, so it's usually beneficial for the parent to know stuff. I'll give you an example. Okay, I have 3 girls, alhamdulillah. One of my daughters was, she was 6, and I was just talking to them about Allah and stuff, our beliefs in Allah. She said, "Baba, is Allah very big?" Okay, now, if I had said yes, that technically would be kufr. Okay, that would be because you're saying Allah actually has 3-dimensional form. Okay, now, and also perhaps that's more of like a theological ruling. Okay, but on a more practical level, if I can't answer my daughter's question, if Islam doesn't seem rational to her growing up, later on in life, she's not going to think Islam is a rational religion or worth believing in. Okay. And this is common, not just amongst kids, but adults as well. We're raised on irrational understandings of religion, uninformed understandings of religion, or they just don't fit with the real world we live in, which is debatable whether it's even able to do that. But the whole point is that at least we are able to contextualize our religion in a certain way, okay? So it's not just, yes, okay, that's a good point. Okay, we'll move on from here because we're spending quite a bit of time on this. So yes, these are just two examples. Okay, one is to correct our actions, correct our acts of worship, do things in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked us or commanded us to do them. And another way is also we relay that religion, we relay Islam to others. Okay, especially as we'll get to, one of the problems of this time we live in is that there is a ton of ignorance. Another narration, perhaps not as well known, is that all of creation asks for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in its own way for the seeker of knowledge. Okay? Now, I don't want to get into the whole metaphysical aspect of this, okay? But essentially, righteous people, including people who seek knowledge and learn Islam, it does change, I don't want to say reality, but it does change certain things that are not perceivable. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that He will not punish the Quraysh as long as the Prophet ﷺ is there. And a lot of our scholars, if you look in books of tafsir, they said when the righteous people, literally the presence of righteous people protects a nation or a people or a community from harm, from punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as long as those righteous people are there and they're doing what needs to be done, they're encouraging good and forbidding evil, then that prevents that entire society from being punished collectively. So, unless of course, for other reasons which we can ask later. So those are some of the virtues. There's many others I was going to mention. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said that talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim, that seeking knowledge is a fard, it's wajib on every single Muslim. But we're going to get to the importance in a second. Now, learning is not just something the everyday Muslim has to do, it is also something that the prophets did. Okay, so learning is not just something the companions of the Prophet ﷺ did, we'll get to them in a second, but also it's something the prophets themselves did. So, like again, the first verse in the Quran, اقرأ بسم ربك الذي خلق, right? It's about knowledge. Who is the student in this case? The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? The teacher is Jibreel alayhi salam, and the student is the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then another case, okay, we don't have time to go through the hadith in detail. Hadith Jibreel, famous hadith, where Jibreel alayhi salam comes to the masjid, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is there, he comes in human form, and essentially there is that whole narration is all about Jibreel alayhi salam demonstrating the importance of knowledge to the Sahaba and how teachers should interact with students and all this sort of stuff. Okay, it's like a major plot point of the story, I guess. So that's another important aspect of it as well. And this is within the sort of capacity of prophets, and even they are tasked with education and learning. Lastly, the story of Musa and Khidr in Surah Al-Kahf is a story all about knowledge. Yes, there's stuff about patience in there as well, and also, who was Khidr alayhi salam, right? That's the question. But in general, though, the story is about knowledge, because Musa alayhi salam is sent to Khidr because he believes he has enough knowledge. So Allah sends him to Khidr alayhi salam, and Musa alayhi salam learns there's somebody who has more knowledge than him, and he has to sort of demonstrate the adab, the sort of etiquettes of a student when he is not able to understand his teacher what he's doing. So even Musa alayhi salam at some point is tasked with learning knowledge. Of course, that's not even mentioning the fact when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls him to speak to him for 40 days. Then the seerah as well. So sort of subtle point, but we don't really talk about how the first institution in Islam was not a masjid. Yes, the first institution in a Muslim-only community was the masjid in Medina, right? But the first institution in Islam, period, was a school, especially in a land or a place where most people are not Muslim, okay? So, very important, the first institution is a school, not a masjid. And also, if you were to wonder, what did the average day in Medina look like? We have two narrations from Jabir ibn Abdullah, who was an adult at that time, and Abdullah ibn Abbas, who was a young, probably like 12 years old or something. Depends on when the story took place. But essentially, they both described, both of their hadith are very similar. They literally described themselves walking into the masjid and describing what they saw. And both of them have a similar description where they talk about how they walked into the masjid and all they saw were people, different people, Arabs, non-Arabs, blacks, whites, everyone just studying the Quran, learning to read and write, learning also how to recite the Quran properly, learning the meanings of the Quran itself. So again, when you look at what's the average day in Medina, right? We all know about the battles and let's say we might know some hadith about the private lives of the Prophet ﷺ and his wives, these kinds of things. But if we were to ask what the average day in Medina looked like, a lot of it was education, okay? No one likes talking about it because it's boring. Is it? Yes. I'm too comfortable with the Tuesday crowd. Okay, now also, according to many of our scholars, Imam an-Nawawi rahimahullah is the most prominent person who mentioned this, seeking knowledge is actually the best optional act of worship you can do. Okay? To the point where, let's say if you've, most people haven't, but if you've already done Hajj once in your life, and you've done Umrah once as well, you fulfilled the wajib, you fulfilled what's obligatory on you, what's more virtuous, traveling and spending that money to seek knowledge, or to just go to a second Hajj? According to this understanding, and some scholars explicitly said this, traveling abroad to seek knowledge, using that money for that purpose instead, is much more virtuous. Okay? So again, this shows us the status of seeking knowledge. It is not just virtuous in itself, but it's also something that has a lot of reward and is a high priority when it comes to our acts of worship. Now, a little bit more serious than that, is that learning certain parts of Islam is wajib. We're going to get to this in a bit more detail when we talk about how to study Islam, so I'm just going to leave that for now. And these things that are wajib means what? Obligatory. And if we do not learn these things, then we're technically sinful for not making the effort to learn and not learning. That's, and again, we'll describe that in more detail. Lastly, this is what Abdullah mentioned there, right? That knowledge is required for correct action. I don't know if it's a Gen Z thing. I'm just getting old. Okay. I've heard this quite often. Okay. It's probably because I'm getting old and cranky. Okay. But sometimes I say something about something or a person that they shouldn't be doing this. And the response I get is, well, their intentions are good. Sure. Okay. Intentions are important. Okay. Intentions are important in Islam. Making sure our heart is in the right place is important. However, correct action is also important. Intentions by themselves are no guarantee of acceptance by Allah, even acceptance ethically. Okay, how many people around the world do evil with some sort of good intention involved, right? Oh yeah, I'll just steal a car. I'm feeding my family. Right? Doesn't mean it's okay, the court. You go to court and say, I just stole the car because I have to feed my family. Of course, I'm not going to care. Okay, it might go a bit lenient on you, but it's not going to care in the end because you took somebody else's property and you have to sort of, face the consequences as a result. So, and this is something people don't understand when it comes to law and stuff and courts, that, it's all my intentions until you get to the actual judge and the lawyers and you realize that you can't only go on intentions. Okay, your action has to be correct as well. So similarly, okay, good intentions, yes, we should have good intentions, but it's also about getting it right, the action, and also beliefs as well. Now, is it still relevant? Okay, is learning Islam still relevant? And even myself, I probably look at stuff from Gaza more than is good for my mental health. Okay, and sometimes the question, even for me, pops up: shouldn't I be doing something about this? Right? Shouldn't I be working towards something else? Why am I teaching Islam? Why am I taking the time to research, read, write, etc.? Okay, shouldn't I be doing something else in my time? Is there something I can do that is more urgent? Something to help the situation that the Muslims are in? But in fact, I have to sort of grab myself and reorient myself, because there are plenty of narrations and plenty of facts on the ground which show that learning Islam is more important than ever. Now, I hope it's here somewhere. Oh, that's the last point, yeah. So, first of all, we live in quite a precarious time. Now, I'm not sure if anybody knows about this, but public education, which is, junior kindergarten all the way to grade 12, whatever, very new concept in human history, even newer for Muslims, because Muslims, got modernity a bit later. But on average, especially you guys in university, you're literally like, by the way, most Muslims in Muslim countries are not educated even to the high school level. Education is actually quite poor if you look at the stats in the Muslim world. So you guys are literally like the 1% of the 1%. You're not just studying a bachelor's degree, you're studying a bachelor's degree in Canada, right? You achieved the post-colonial dream. So we spend on average 13 to 18 years learning about the world. 13 if you're going until high school, 18 if you're sticking in until university, bachelor's degree, that's it. If you do more than that, you're learning a lot more. If you learn nothing about Islam in those 13 to 18 years, yes, Islam is going to feel strange, it's going to feel different, it's going to feel like it's something else. Now I'll share something with you. I don't know if this was from Shaitan. When I was in university, that's when I started studying Islam myself. We used to go to these classes that used to be held in downtown Toronto. And I remember and I don't come from like a religious practicing family or anything. So when I used to go to class, this was weekend classes we used to have, sometimes I'd just sit there and this thought would occur in my head. Am I wasting my time? Shouldn't I be like studying for my test or exam or doing my lab report, right? That thought would go through my head randomly. And I'd have to sort of suppress it and be like, no, this is important. And I know this is important, right? So we're conditioned because of how we grew up, especially here, but even in Muslim countries, to be honest. We're conditioned to think about religion in a certain way. There's a whole bunch of social political reasons for that. And we're also conditioned, and also, of course, sins. Okay, the amount of haram and fitna that we encounter on a daily basis, it's affecting us. And on top of that, we don't know much about Islam itself. So there's no, the only reason Islam is still surviving, actually, I don't want to get too depressing, okay? One of my teachers said the only reason Islam still survives in the West is because of immigration. I'm like, no, Sheikh, that's too much. Then I came here, I'm like, might be a point, okay? But also, the reason why Muslims have their faith to this day, wallahi, it's barakah. It's just from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're hanging on by a thread, and we're only hanging on to our faith because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it. Okay? So, my personal belief is that for every educated Muslim, somebody who's in a bachelor's degree at the very minimum, okay, you should have the equivalent of 1 year full-time Islamic studies. Now, that doesn't mean you do it 1 year, you let everything go, but I'm saying the equivalent. You can do that over 10, 15 years, okay? But again, this is me from an educator's background, okay? I don't just teach Islam, but I taught for a long time in the schooling system as well. Preservation of faith, okay? Now, with the amount of Muslims, this is related to the last point, with the amount of Muslims adopting ideas that have no basis in Islam or leaving Islam completely, okay? If you think that it's not a priority to learn Islam and understand it properly, then there won't be an ummah left to save. You're not going to be, if you want to get, okay, we got to focus on saving the ummah, helping the ummah, we got to focus on some sort of revival or, social upgrade to the Muslim world. Well, if Islam's not there anymore, then what are you helping save, right? Then it's not there anymore. You're saving Muslim culture, which is not really Islam or Muslims. It's just Eastern, Arab, Indo-Pak culture, whatever. Lastly, now, I hate to sound like a boomer or something, okay? But I was in the Arab world when the Arab Spring happened. So I witnessed a whole generation, and I had a lot of hope as well, that things would change in the Muslim world as a result of what was happening then. But unfortunately, and the problem, it's still, like who's in first year? No, actually, who's in last year? Sorry, last year. When were you guys born? 2003, right? So you guys did experience 9/11, first of all. You don't know the ripple effect that had, on living here as a Muslim or in the Muslim world as well. okay? And on top of that, you probably were a kid when this Arab Spring stuff happened, like 2011, 2013. You'd be like 10 years old, right? Like I was living in the Arab world when that happened, and I remember how it felt, okay? That you had all this hope that Muslims are finally doing something about our condition, about where we are, okay? I'll finally be able to live in the Muslim world comfortably, okay? Things are looking bright, and next thing you know, it all comes crashing down. And one thing I learned from that was that we're just not ready. Muslims fought against their own revival. Nobody else did it, by the way. Yeah, there's sure, maybe people pulling the string somewhere, okay? But we fought against our own revival. Why? Because Muslim countries, like I said, education is very poor. Not just Islamic education, non-religious education is very poor. And when you don't have education, we don't know what you don't, when you don't have any knowledge, you're either swayed by your emotions or by whoever is giving the political speeches. Okay? So people can't tell the difference. And that's very important because if we don't have knowledge, you don't have anything to base on your decisions on except your emotions, right? And politicians are experts, okay, at harnessing the power of emotion to get you support for their cause. So very important, okay, that the Muslim world, I know I've already been quite pessimistic twice during this thing, okay? I'm not trying to be pessimistic. What I'm saying is we have to work practically. We have to improve ourselves first, okay? And I'm telling you, you improve yourselves first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create the way for revival, create the way for change in the Muslim ummah, right? But if we don't change ourselves first, لا يغير الله ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. Allah says in the Quran that He will not change what is within a people until they change themselves. So, and I remember to this day, the day after the Egyptian government took the military, they took over, and they kicked out Morsi, put him in prison, rahmallah. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? The day after, I was actually in Canada, and I remember it was my sister's wedding, and the whole time I was on my phone just watching the news, okay? Because I was just so like engrossed by it. And I remember it was Jummah when the Jummah of that same week, when all this stuff happened, the khutbah was about that. And I remember I was so like upset and angry about what happened. As soon as I heard the Sheikh, it was Sheikh Talal Ahdab, he was giving the khutbah in Isna. And he mentioned this verse, right? لا يغير الله ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. And I immediately calmed down because I realized, what did I expect? I had the wrong expectations. Okay? So, when older people say something to you, okay, sometimes boomer stuff, sometimes useful. Learn to life skills, like learn to differentiate but elders usually we should pay attention to what they're saying. So how do I learn? Okay, the goal of this is just to shamelessly promote my blog, but also I want to help people save some time and give some guidance on what you should learn and how. So if you search how to study Islam on Google, the first article you'll see is mine. Okay. And no, but I'm reason I'm mentioning that is I just took stuff from there. I summarized stuff from there. Okay. If you're really interested, it's a long one, but you can read that, and inshallah you will get more than what you're looking for. So there are 3 levels to learning. The last 2 we will not talk about too much. The first is learning is obligation. Okay, as an Islamic obligation to learn, that it has certain steps. Number 2 and 3 are more like advanced learning. If you want to become like a formal student of knowledge, you want to become a scholar, okay, that's something else. Is very different from the first one. And teachers are recommended for all steps, okay? You can get by with reading books and stuff, but it's never going to be the same thing as studying with a teacher. Now, knowing how to learn Islam, like I said, oh dear, there's 22 messages. Okay, okay, not questions, right? That's scary. Anyways, knowing how just popped up. Knowing how to learn Islam can save you years or even decades of time. When I say decades, I mean it. Okay, I've seen people aimlessly wandering, like they spend tons of money going to the East and they waste like 10 years of their life because they didn't know how to study. And once they figure it out, sometimes they never do, by the way. Sometimes they never figure it out, and they come back here and you think they're a sheikh or sheikha. Usually not sheikhas, usually the guys who are messed up. Like the sheikh comes back, you think he's a sheikh, the guy's ignorant. Okay, it's terrifying, but it is the case. So learning is obligation. How do we know what is obligatory to learn? Luckily, scholars of fiqh discuss this many times, okay, throughout their books. So first of all, you need to learn enough Islamic theology necessary to be a Muslim, okay? Any scholarly Sunni creed is fine, okay? If you don't understand those names, it's probably a good thing, okay? But if you do, then that is how it works, okay? That any scholarly creed is fine. It doesn't matter which one it is, but it has to be a Sunni creed or whatever, okay? But you should be studying Islamic creed from the past, preferably. Seerah and prophetic characteristics should also be learned, okay? You should know who the Prophet ﷺ is. You should know his story. You should know what he was like, his characteristics. And that books have been written on that topic and classes are done all the time. Doubts and confusions must be resolved. Guys, if you have doubts about your faith or you're confused about certain things, you have to resolve those. And they can be resolved. If you don't, it comes out later. You can't suppress it forever. Okay, I know people in their 30s and 40s, 50s I haven't yet encountered. 30s and 40s, I know people left Islam when they're married and have kids and stuff. Okay, and the whole family falls apart and all this sort of stuff happens. But the thing is, you want to make sure that you are addressing your doubts and confusions as early as possible. And unfortunately, a lot of the YouTube lot doesn't do it very well, because all they do is sort of yell at the microphone. Anyways, don't get me started on that. And relate to the last point, okay, do not waste time at this stage focusing on controversies in Sunni Islam. Please do not do that, okay? Because it's not worth your time, okay? It's not worth your time. A lot of those conversations are scholarly, okay? They're discussions and debates that took place between scholars of Islam. There's no need for you to get involved in those discussions at all. And you will likely not understand them unless you study to the level they studied as well, or close. Number two, learning fiqh, which is like Islamic law, necessary to perform obligations and avoid sins. So I recommend studying one of the four fiqh madhabs, but it doesn't have to be the case, okay? As long as you have a teacher who has studied one of those and he's just teaching you fiqh, that's usually sufficient. Okay, you don't have to be so, tribalistic about how you study fiqh. If necessary, some exposure to something called usul al-fiqh, which is how the Quran and Sunnah are interpreted, might be useful. Okay, that might be useful in order to understand how scholars differ, why they differ, how do they arrive at different opinions, etc., just so you don't think it's all arbitrary. And also so you don't become too hard-nosed about the opinion that you prefer. Okay, it is important to learn some of that. Number three, learning enough Islamic spirituality, very neutral word, to maintain a relationship with Allah. Okay, we should know enough about what Islam and the Quran say about our soul and how we get closer to Allah. We should learn that stuff. So, for example, taqwa, tawbah, right? Tawbah, what is tawbah? How do you do it, right? I'll give you an example. Like tawbah, you cannot ask Allah for forgiveness from your sins. It doesn't count unless you have regret in your heart. Okay, regret is an essential part of tawbah. If you don't regret your sin, then tawbah doesn't happen. You don't get forgiven for it. Tawakkul, ikhlas, okay, so tawakkul is relying on Allah. Ikhlas is sincerity. Okay, these kinds of concepts, there are certain details to them that we have to know as Muslims. It's important to have a teacher just for spirituality, okay? Why? Because it's more like a mentor, not a teacher. It's not something you learn in a book, but it's important to have a mentor. It's important to have a guide when it comes to your spirituality. Now, this is much harder for females because unfortunately, especially here in Toronto, there aren't that many, I don't think there's any female scholars or female sort of learned students of knowledge who are female. As far as I've tried, okay? There's like one, but she's not really a scholar, okay? But it is a problem because then women don't have a role model that they can look up to and stuff. But for guys, there are plenty, okay, around, and you can just ask around. And you should have a mentor or a guide or someone who helps you, right? If you just sit there and ruminate on how you're spiritually falling off the rails, That's not going to help you. It doesn't do anything, okay? You need help. Okay, lastly, okay, after those three things, you learn for the rest of your life whatever you need to learn. Okay, tajweed, how to recite the Quran properly. Seerah in detail, it's good to learn. Learning Arabic, okay, if you are able to, just to understand the basic meanings of the Quran at the very least. Tafsir, okay, explanations of the Quran. Maintaining the company of scholars and the righteous in general, once a week, once a month, okay. Just important to stay grounded, okay, you're living. Unfortunately, where we are, you do have to sometimes step into the bubble. I live in the bubble, okay? But you sometimes have to step into the bubble just to survive. Take a breath, go back to work or school, okay? But you need to be in the company of the scholars and the righteous and make it a consistent habit, okay? Like I said, once a week, once a month, just to sort of rejuvenate the type of people you're spending your time with. Keep learning new sunnahs and keep reciting and reflecting over the Quran. Attend seminars or classes on topics of interest, like this one. And lastly, read books, not just, I'm very hardcore about books, okay? Read books, not just, for Islam, just read books in general. Very important, very good for you. Okay, I'm just gonna go through this very quickly, okay? If you want to become a formal student of Islam, there's many reasons why you would. I'm not going to go through them, okay? And it involves some step, okay? Arabic is critical. Okay, if you're in a serious learning program for Islam and it's not in Arabic, it's a waste of your time, okay? They're just marketing it for you and getting, there's degree programs for Islamic studies with no Arabic. Ignore that stuff, okay? Do not waste time in a Western Islamic studies program without this, okay? This is interesting because UFT has one of the best ones. So yeah, Islamic studies programs, okay, in the West, this is a long topic, but essentially you want to make sure you've studied a traditional Islamic curriculum before you go to Western Islamic studies. Now there's steps involved to this, okay? You have to learn certain subjects. So things called alat, which are tools, and maqasid, which are objectives. Essentially things like, Arabic grammar, Islamic etiquettes of learning. Also, that's not etiquettes of learning, it's Arabic literature, okay? So Arabic grammar, Arabic literature, logic, usul al-fiqh, which is how to interpret the Quran and Sunnah, mustalah hadith, which is how you know when the hadith are authentic or not, and then the maqasid, which are things like hadith, theology, spirituality, history, tafsir, and fiqh, etc. Okay, Islamic law, all these things. This stuff often gets confused with the stuff we did before, and this is why I put some detail into this. Usually when I tell people, hey, you should take learning Islam a bit more seriously, people think I'm asking them to do this. I'm not, okay? I'm asking you to do the stuff previously mentioned, okay? So just because you're gonna study the stuff previously does not make you a scholar. We have very low standards in the West, okay? You and me, I studied 6 years, come back, everyone's like, Sheikh, okay, you haven't seen a real scholar anyways. It's, what's it called? So yeah, okay, studying Islam for everyone does not mean this stuff. You don't have to go that deep into it. The earlier stuff I talked about, okay, that's what's important. And then just as a last note, okay, if you want to become a scholar, it takes decades, okay? It takes decades. Most of the people in the West, including myself, who we think we're scholars, we're actually not. Just the standards are so low here, okay, in the West, and everyone, you studied for 6 years abroad, you come back, you're nothing. You come back, you just think wow, I'm sheikh, okay, because the level is that low, unfortunately. So, researching further in traditional subjects, okay, specialization will occur inevitably, just like it does in university, okay? When you do a PhD, you're not going to do it in everything. You're going to do it in one specific topic. Similarly, okay, and then just like a PhD as well, requires studies in reading outside of traditional disciplines, wherever they might be. Okay, but that takes decades. And just so you know, that becoming a scholar is not a 6-year program. It literally takes 10, 20, 30 years of reading, study, research, etc. Oh yes, beware of me, basically. Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, so I guess I'm done. If you have any questions, and perhaps one thing I should have added here is where can I do all this stuff? There's so many programs nowadays. Okay, Again, I will shamelessly promote mine, which is Faham education, but also there's tons of others. Okay, numerous institutes in the U.S. have started programs like there's Qasim al-Ulum, Qalam Institute. They have all these people have online programs now. I can't keep track of them now, like Miftah. Okay, there's many numerous online programs where you can do all the stuff that I mentioned before. Those basics. Okay, so there isn't really an excuse anymore. If you talk to like boomers, actual boomers, not me. Okay, I'm a millennial. If you talk to actual boomers, when they first came here, there was literally nothing. Okay, there was no resources. There wasn't even halal meat. And now we have Bridgeway Plaza. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So it's just there's so much out there. Okay, and unfortunately, everyone's content with like the YouTube stuff, which is not good for you. Okay, we need actual you need actual education in the same way that you educate yourself here in school. Okay, questions? There's another slide. Oh, never mind. Okay, that's kind of cringe now that I look at it. Anyways, yes.
How much, like, the social media influence, how much did that influence you to make this presentation?
A lot. Look, before social media, wow, I'm old, don't I? Before social media, okay, there were similar things online, like internet forums and stuff. And same stuff happened on them. All the nonsense you see on social media used to happen there, but it was much more private, right? It was like a specific website you had to go to. Now it's everywhere. Everyone's exposed to the nonsense. Yes, of course it is, because the problem is you see people arguing about stuff really viciously and causing all sorts of problems, people who have like thousands of followers, and they're arguing about things that, in all honesty, they don't know much about, right? And I can tell because I've read the book or whatever, right? Like I've studied the stuff and I can tell right away they're not understanding, they don't have some very basic understandings in there. And it's just that they were too quick to start talking about things. And it's very easy to do that online, right? It's very easy online to talk about things you don't fully understand. So this is one of the reasons why I did this, but again, it's also because I've been an educator for a long time and this is pretty much my thing. And our scholars talk about this too. It's not something new. Okay? No? Yes?
So you were talking about your daughter, the question, they don't already, like, what's the right answer to it?
That I can't remember what I said to her because I have to grade the language, right? But basically, you cannot describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in three-dimensional ways, right? Allah, the creator of time and space, cannot be described with time and space. So size is not a correct question to ask about. The question itself is wrong, basically. Okay? I didn't tell her that. How dare you ask this question, though? She's a kid. Anything else? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of iffy guys out there. There's actually an example I know of. There's an iffy example I know of. It's more dangerous for this side of the room than this side. Don't get me started. Anyways, yeah. Honestly, look for online programs like Sheikha Tamara Gray, Rabata. She's awesome. Okay. It's hard though. I don't really have an answer, unfortunately. Okay, but the online world now is the next best thing. So that's all you can do. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Is there a space between like learning what is mandatory for every Muslim and being like an actual student of knowledge? Is there something between there? Or
I mean, if you want to split hairs, yeah, I mean, like, sure, you could find something, but just keep it simple. I would say that no, there isn't for now. To keep things simple. Yes, all the Tuesday class people are asking stuff. Yeah.
What did you have to back for, like, something?
This is a blog post, man. The blog post. There's too many, like, there's a good story on books. Yes. Huh? What's my favorite book? It's like asking a kid what's favorite candy.
Something you read.
Something, Quran? No, no. I mean, there's so many, man. I just, that's a very difficult question. Okay, yes.
How do you feel about Edmund Kadam and its role in this kind of stuff? So,
Are you familiar with?
how would Edmund Kadam feel about that with comparison to all this as well?
Ilm al what, sorry?
Edmund Kadam.
Yes, what about it?
How do you feel about it and its relevance to this generation, like doubts and whatnot?
Very relevant, but not the topic of discussion. Requires its own preamble and conclusion and stuff. Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes. I know why you're asking this question. No, the other discussion we had, right? I mean, the basics, right? But in a way that's like, the problem with a lot of people who teach children, just yesterday, by the way, guys, feel free to leave. Feel free to leave. Don't be scared. For now. What's it called? I don't know what that meant. There was an example I saw yesterday. I can't remember what it was. But let's say my daughter, right, the 6-year-old. Let's say she asked that question to her teacher, and her teacher didn't know her stuff. And this happens a lot in Islamic schools, right? Islamic schools, a lot of the teachers in Islamic schools, Islamic studies, they don't know what they're talking about. They just got like an auntie from down the street who wears hijab, and she prays a lot. It's like, auntie, come please teach Islamic studies. She's like, okay. So school doesn't want to pay her anything, right? Anyways, long story. But that's the case for a lot of Islamic schools, especially the elementary school teachers. They think, oh, it's just fine, just have a lady there who reads Quran, for example, right? The problem is if my kid asked her that question and she said, yes, okay, is Allah very big? She said, yes. Then my daughter, for the next years of her life, she thinks of Allah as some big thing, like an actual physical thing, right? The problem with that is see, it's difficult when you get older to realize how much of an impact your teachers had on you. I'm talking to you, of course, you already know this stuff, right? But for the rest of the people in the room, okay, it's very difficult to comprehend as you get older. I know this because I taught in a school, okay? I know this stuff because I taught in a school, but I've seen how education works. Teachers plant seeds in your mind, and you don't know those seeds are there when you grow up, but they affect you for the rest of your life, right? So same thing, the basic stuff, but prophet stories and stuff, obviously you have to change the pedagogy to be more relatable to kids, but same stuff essentially, but you just build up to it slowly. If you want a good example, the Suffer publication series, I don't know if you know about that. We'll talk after, but yeah, there's a whole textbook series for kids. It's actually really good. That's a good outline for stuff. Oh, okay. I had a feeling this was coming. Tell what, sorry? I don't, sorry? What did you say? On the, okay. Okay, yeah, yeah. Mental need, I don't know what you said. Then one of the requirements for an accepted tawbah is feeling a sense of guilt. But what if someone is a psychopath and are incapable of feeling guilt? Not a serious question, just curious. Okay, moving on then. Anyways, hey, how do we choose a madhab, school of thought? Just choose whatever's convenient, okay? If you're gonna study a fiqh madhab, just choose whatever's convenient. Don't worry too much about it. Guys, people make madhabs like their pronoun, okay? On Twitter especially, right? It's like the guy goes like, Maturidi Hanafi. And then there are also these posts where they're like, oh, I changed my madhab today. It's like, shut up. Anyway, sorry, it just annoys me. Okay, how would one answer the question she asked? Okay, people asked that question. I think I answered it already. How much knowledge is learned only through spending time with righteous people? Good. Spending time with righteous people, you learn experiential knowledge. You pick up small things that you wouldn't get in a classroom or you wouldn't get in a book. Okay? I'll give you an example. One of my teachers, He was a PhD in Sharia. He's a professor. Like he graduated he finished his PhD, went back to Somalia. He was from Somalia, right? When whenever I used to go study with him, I would study on like the residence for students, right? I used to go visit him in his residence. We would do classes in his dorm. So one thing I noticed whenever I went out with him to like drink tea or whatever, or get some snacks, right, during class, like a lot of people, especially his fellow Somalis, right, because they all drink tea and stuff, like a lot of his friends, people who knew him and met him often, they didn't know that he was a scholar. They didn't know what faculty he was in. And it was because like he didn't flaunt it, right? To the point where I was studying a book with him and somebody came up to me. I had the book in my hand. I was waiting for him to come out of the masjid. And somebody came and said, "Oh, who are you studying this book with?" And I said, "With Khalil, with Sheikh Khalil," right? He said, "Khalil? Really? He teaches that stuff? I never knew," right? But it was just that very small thing. He never said anything to me about it, obviously. And there's another instance as well. We went to this senior Saudi scholar. We went to his house. It's not just me and him, like a whole bunch of us, like the 30, 40 international students. I wasn't a student, but I was just there as well. He invited me. And the sheikh asked, "Who is the most knowledgeable person out of this gathering?" And I remember my sheikh was sitting behind me, and his friend next to him is like, "Khalil, Khalil," right? And he's like, "Shh," right? And it's a very small thing, right? But it had a huge effect on me because it's just like, it's just, like, it was that small stuff that, just, you don't flaunt your knowledge, right? Like you shouldn't, I mean, it's known though, like you shouldn't be arrogant. You shouldn't walk into rooms like everyone should call me sheikh now, right? No, it's just that, just the way he did it, like those small things, like they just, left an impression. So people sometimes are taken aback by how I talk. I sometimes go a bit too far. I'm too casual, okay? But, because sarcasm can kill apparently. But I sometimes go too far, even being casual. But the thing is, I got that from him. Okay, just sort of rubbed off on me. I can never see myself as being like the sheikh. Okay, it's just weird. Anyways, yeah. So small stuff like that, okay, didn't come as a result of a book, okay, but it's just seeing him and the way he used to act and behave. What if you learn, but you feel as if the knowledge doesn't sink into your heart? Isn't it better to master your basics than fail at higher goals? Yes. Okay, if knowledge is not affecting your heart, if it's not being implemented, if it's not changing who you are, just hold off on studying for a bit. Let that happen first. Okay, slow down. There's no point in learning 20 years and you become a corrupt, messed up person, which does happen. It's rare. A lot of people think it's more common than it is, but it does happen. I think that's it, right? Hi. Yes. Is that one of you? Is that you? I don't know how to reply to it. Hi. Anyways. Okay, yeah, that's it. Nobody else has questions? Yes. Oh, good. I didn't mention that. Yeah, it's a requirement. There's numerous schools of thought, but I think it is true that if you don't know Arabic, it's easier to memorize. Because you're just memorizing sounds then, right? Whereas if you know the meaning, it's very easy to like swap out words and like mix stuff up. Yeah, that's my personal experience. People have said that too, and it just makes sense to me. But you can do both at the same time. It's just harder. Yeah, but memorizing inshallah first. Let's get people who haven't gone yet. Yes. Like locally? Not really. Okay. And there's numerous reasons why, but let's just say I'll give you an example. Okay. You guys know that you guys all know Ridgeway Plaza, right? Anyways, okay, you know that Musalla there, Dar al Arqam? You know how much the rent for that is? $8,000 per month. Yes. Okay. So me and some friends were looking into trying to start something. We tried all last year. For some reason, masajid, as soon as you come to them and say, I want to start like an educational program under my institute in your masjid, they think of it as competition. Okay, anyways, whatever, be ranting. But the thing is, I tried a lot last year, and then we tried to like figure out how to go about it, right? The problem is you need $8,000 in lawyer fees just to start, and then you need the rent as well, okay? So to have a physical space, and then of course, once you get the physical space, it takes a while before people get interest and donations start rolling in. So logistically, it's a nightmare. Okay, that's the main reason for me, at least, and how I've seen it. Otherwise, there are certain institutions, but they all have issues. Okay, not just that one, there's others too. Okay, I mean, I wish honestly there are some like there are like more traditional like Hanafi ones, like Qasim al Ulum in Scarborough. There's one in Chatham, like a really big one as well. Okay, those things do exist, but unfortunately, because of those types of institutions have their own culture, and not everyone vibes with that. Right? I'm really hoping ISNA Canada is more. They're the most promising thing I've seen in Mississauga. I'm really hoping they turn it up a notch and have better classes, but so far it's just conference style stuff as the problem. But it's just a good thing. It's important. It has its use. Okay? Hope I'm not too depressing. Anyways. Okay, if nobody has any questions, Jazakum khair. I guess we'll stop here.